Yo, what's going on? It's me, Jay. First video of the new year, 2023. Hope all of y'all New Year's was good, and we're gonna talk a little bit about this story that hit the news early part of January the 2nd. It was a good morning, Lise. It was a game. Damar Hamlin of the Buffalo Bills suffering a cardiac arrest right there on the field. For those that don't know, a cardiac arrest is basically a heart attack. There's a lot of other technical terms that go into it. Heart and lungs connected, cardiac, cardiary and pulmonary um, restrictions in his heart and lungs. And, as you can see in the video, somebody coming directly at him, and all of a sudden he just claps. When I first heard about it, I don't, many people know on the channel, I don't pay attention to football. I don't really watch football all that much, or any sport, to be honest, besides MMA. But when I first saw it, I'm like, okay, that's a concussion, because we know from the Dr. Amalu movie Concussion that Will Smith put out a couple of years ago that all these reports, like with Aaron Hernandez doing what he did, the murder that he committed, it was that CT played a factor, and concussion syndrome played a factor. We know that there's this big hoopla around the sport of football and concussions. So I thought it was something like that. You know what I mean? Oh man, he suffered a concussion. But then, as I watched the video, I'm like, the guy didn't even touch him. You know what I'm saying? Like, he didn't even touch him really. So it couldn't have really been a concussion. He just seemed like he just went down. And then Lisa is telling me, we're discussing it, and then Lisa's telling me that his first words after this happened, after he was revived, was that, how's the team doing? Something to that effect. And it's like, you just suffered an injury, a heart attack that could have potentially killed you, and that's what you care about. Yeah, did we win? Basically, yeah, did we win? How the team's doing? Basically the same thing. You know what I mean? And it's like, I mean, it's cool you're dedicated to the team, and it's cool you're dedicated to the sport. But it's like we talked about in a couple other videos with Simone Biles. Um, your mental health and your physical health, your health in general, is more important than a game. You know what I mean? Or a sport or accolades. But we put so much attention, so much onus, and so much focus on sports that a lot of people think, well, if I don't perform up to par and I don't win games, as it were, I am not worth anything. That's the value that they place on these players. Like if they're cattle, or if they're, you know, um, just beasts of burden, or robots. They're not robots, they're human beings. They have human emotions, human functions. They have working hearts, working lungs. And if they don't have that, and that's not to par, then they can't play up to peak physical condition. So, yeah, my thoughts on the NFL. I feel like football is a very dangerous game. Football is like war. you know what I mean? You know what I mean? The mentality of football is like war, is a warlike mentality, is a warrior game. Yeah, they perform. Lisa's saying they perform CPR right there on the field. Yeah, because they wanted to, I guess, finish the game. This is sort of like, when Owen Hart died, in 1999, they scraped his dead body off the mat and continued to wrestle, you know, or when Jeff Berg suffered that hair bone fracture um, when he played for the Jets in the 70s. You know what I mean? So when freak accidents like this happen, all they really care about is finishing the game or getting the money. The NFL is a greedy business, and I think they really don't care. I mean, I know they really don't care about their players. It's just a capitalist endeavor to make money. What's some of your thoughts, Reese, on this situation? What do you think? Do you think that the NFL, what should the NFL do to minimize, accidents like this? Should and my thing is, if he had a heart condition, right? Now that I know it's cardiac arrest, when I found out it was cardiac arrest, if he had a heart condition, why is he playing? Why uh don't they have don't they have doctors that do blood pressure work and check the vital signs before these players come out on the field? If he has I mean, he's not just gonna pop out with a bad ticker, out of nowhere. When somebody has a heart condition, I mean, yes, heart attacks, and this brings me back to the late Barbara Walters. She was one of the first to really talk about heart attacks and how and be an advocate for a safe cardiac condition. She was one of the big healthy heart advocates, throughout her life because she suffered heart attacks. And they do say, and I saw this documentary with her years ago, that um, heart attacks are a silent killer. You know what I mean? And sometimes they do sneak up on you. But 9 times out of 10, when people have a heart attacks, when people have you know heart attacks, it's not all that sudden. There are there are incidences like the person had chest pains, or we said cardiac pulmonary, so that it was connected. Like he I'm hearing that I had shortness of breath, something. And granted, he probably, knowing him, what he said, after it happened, did we win? His dedication to the game, his preoccupation with winning the game, especially being from a team, the Buffalo Bills, you don't really hear much about him. So he'll probably lie and say that he is feeling good when he ain't. You know what I mean? But they need to do more thorough checks. They need to check this more. He's 28. That's true, Lisa. But he 28 years old. But he's an athlete. The task the task he accomplishes far exceed the average individual. He runs a lot. He jumps a lot. He exerts his heart more than the average individual. The dude is not sitting on his couch, eating Doritos, watching uh, Netflix all day. You know what I mean? He's out there playing football. He's doing a physical activity. He's physically exerting himself. You know what I mean? He's putting stress on his heart. You know what I mean? Okay, Lisa says he wasn't on the field when he woke back up. But regardless of when he woke back up, you need to be more concerned of your health, because if you're not alive and you don't be alive for your family, there's no point in playing football. You know what I mean? Football and sports needs to come secondary to your actual physical and mental health. You know, I mean, I get it. He's dedicated, to his craft. But still, in the NFL, he should have never been allowed to play. I'm sure he showed signs of shortness of breath. I'm sure he had an irregular heartbeat, maybe. You know what I mean? They didn't do an EKG. I don't know what Skip Bayless said. Skip Bayless, I don't know what did he say? Oh, okay. Okay. Hang on, please. Oh, okay. He says, end that quote. No doubt the NFL is considering postponing the game. But how? This late in the season, a game of this magnitude is crucial to the regular season outcome, which suddenly seems so irrelevant. Well, duh, Skip Bayless. It is irrelevant. We're talking about a man's health. You're gonna sit there and tell me that a game is more important than the actual man's health. The guy could have died on the field, and the family would have sued the NFL. Then the NFL would have lost money. I'm sorry, Skip Bayless. I'm glad you sent me that at least. Thank you. The 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 man's health is 10 times more important than a fucking game. And if you think that the game, yes, the game is rendered irrelevant. Why? Because it's a game. It's of little to no consequence in the actual world. The value that's placed on it is placed on it because we place value on it. You know, we everybody needs recreation, and in American society in particular, football occupies a tremendous space in the lives of American uh, men and women. But that doesn't mean that it's of attached importance. It's not of actual importance. It's not of actual consequence. People win and lose. Teams win and lose games every single day. So what? You know, they have guaranteed contracts. It's not like they get paid based on how they perform. They don't get paid if they win more if they win games. They already have guaranteed money. So you know, that comment was full of shit. Yeah, yeah, it was. Lisa says that was heartless of him. Well, he's a heartless motherfucker, obviously. Again, they get paid. Not, it's not like, okay, if he doesn't perform, he doesn't perform, he doesn't get paid. That's not true. He'll get paid whether he performs or not. So shouldn't he then take care of his health a little more, or put his health as a greater priority than for a freaking game? It's not like y'all don't get, you as the sports journalist. It's not like you don't get paid um, if he doesn't perform. You get paid if he, even though he doesn't perform. So yeah, I don't understand why you're surprised that people are saying that It's just like the Simone Biles thing when she quit the Olympics because of her mental health, and people were so I don't know. You know, I mean, it's hard to really say what the NFL can do other than at least um, better medical examinations, better medical exam. Because what can I mean? You can't make the game safer because then you modify the game, and then it ain't football no more. So, other than I think guys, I think it should be like something like with boxing. In boxing and in mixed martial arts, you have to have medical clearance from the state in order to be able to compete in a boxing match or in a mixed martial arts match. Um, they have the state athletic commissions in each state, and they send their doctors, the state doctors, out there, to perform, your vital examinations, heart examinations, blood pressure, all that stuff. Um, before you play. You know what I mean? And if you don't pass those examinations, you don't meet the criteria, then you don't get to have that fight. You don't meet certain requirements. They used to back in the old days, before the business was completely exposed, they used to do it for wrestling as well. There are stories the older wrestlers tell that where the state athletic commission would deny them from wrestling that night because they had a high blood pressure or a bad heart or something like that, you know, an irregular heartbeat, and they wouldn't allow them to wrestle that night. That was the government, you know, taking over a private entity, uh, like a boxing promotion or an MMA promotion like the UFC or Golden Boy Productions or whatever, because putting the participants' health as a priority over profits, prioritizing people over profits, basically. And I think that's what the NFL needs to do. As far as like modifying how the game is played, you really can't, because I mean that's the nature of the beast, but what you can do is if they're in a bad condition, and don't take their word for it, because these men and women, like I said, they don't get paid as they play. They do have guaranteed contracts, and there is guaranteed money involved, so they'll get paid whether or not they perform up to par or not, whether or not they win games or not. They'll still get paid. It's a contractual basis, but still they're competitors. The reason why they entered into sports is because they have a competitive nature, and they want to win, and they want to be successful, and they want to have their name in lights, as it were, and gain that sort of publicity. So they'll lie about it. You know what I mean? They'll try to obfuscate it. They'll cover it up, whatever the case may be. And you know, so the doctors don't need to take their word for it. The doctors need to do their due diligence and investigate. Does he have high blood pressure? Does he have an irregular heartbeat? Perform EKGs, perform all the things that are medically necessary for this person to play. Don't allow the person to go out there and in a bad condition and possibly die on the field, because then it's a liability for the league. The family can sue the league. The family can sue um, the network that is airing the league. The family can sue the team. The family can sue everyone. So if you allow somebody like that condition to perform in that way, it's a liability for the team, a liability for the league, a liability for sponsors. It's a whole big mess. So they need to do their due diligence as far as their doctors and have better doctors and more honest doctors and more thorough doctors. So that's what I think they need to do. Yeah, Lisa is saying it reminded her of the movie, the Dr. Malu movie, Concussions. And yeah, Lisa said on Instagram I think it was Instagram or Twitter, she said that the NFL needs to put time in making these games safer because it scared a lot of parents. The NFL probably scared something like something like this. Yeah, their response is bullshit. They're trying to cover it up, basically. Uh, Here's what they said: the millions of fans continue to keep Buffalo Bills Damar Hamlin in their thoughts. The NFL today announced a series of evacuations to support of Bills in support of the Bills' safety that will occur across the league during week 13 games at 22 clubs, and the option to utilize the following activations with specific call-outs. Notice this will be unique to the bill to Buffalo. The NFL distributed a public address announcements that the clubs are encouraged to read prior to the national anthem as a unified show of support for Damar, the first responders, and the medical caregivers. Okay, not okay. Yeah, you're saying you're gonna do all that, but those are symbolic gestures. At the beginning of the national anthem, we're gonna to a moment of silence or whatever. But you're not saying what you're gonna do as far as the nuts and bolts. How are you gonna improve medical conditions for players? You know, and where's the players union in all this? They're supposed to be. I mean, a moment of silence, symbolic gestures. You're gonna do a bunch of activities for him. Yeah, but if he was dead, that wouldn't bring him back. You know what I mean? That wouldn't prevent. I mean, nothing bring him back, but that wouldn't prevent other players from getting hurt in the future. I'm pretty sure they do have a players union. At least most sports do. Most organized sports do have a players union, and the players union should be the ones to say, listen, if we don't have better medical checks, we don't have thorough medical checks, EKGs or anything, our players are not performing. And without the players, there's no league. You know what I mean? It's not like a regular job where you can hire scabs. You can't hire Mexicans or people from Central America, illegal immigrants from Central America, to uh, you know, play in the NFL. If the players refuse to play, then the league doesn't have a league. You know, they don't have a game. So they need to think about that. The players union needs to advocate for them more on behalf of them. Okay, wow. Lisa just sent me another message of a player, Chuck Hughes, 28 years old, of the Detroit Lions, who died on their field after he had a blood clot when he was tackled. But so this has happened before. There's something in the legal world called a precedent. When something has happened before, there is a way to look at it so that when it happens again, we can point to it and say, okay, this is something similar, and we know what actions to take. So there is a precedent for something like this. A man had a player. Well, let's see when this happened. This happened in 1971, guys. October 24th, 1971. Okay, so after that, basically they had more than 30 years to do something more about it, and they did nothing, and it happened again. Completely irresponsible. They need to have a better union. They need to have more thorough background checks, and they just need to do better. You know what I mean? Because that was 40 years ago, 42 years ago to be exact. And you still haven't done better. In fact, you've done worse. You know what I mean? Because players are more injured now than they ever were. And the game resumed. Man, people don't really look into and people don't really do the knowledge um, when it comes to the origins of sports. Where do sports come from? What are some of the ancient versions of sports in antiquity, like Rome, Greece? You got to remember, sports comes from the ancient, at least in a Roman context, the ancient uh, gladiator games in Rome. And during those days, those were those players were killed and they were considered as expendable. Watch the movie The Gladiator, um, the 2001 movie with Russell Crowe, and see how gladiator players were treated in those days in ancient Rome. And we're not that far off from where they were 2023 years later, from where they were in the first century AD. The owners and stuff, they still have that kind of same mentality that players are just expendable. That if a player dies, get hurt, get injured, they'll just skip them off the field and find another one. They don't really care. But that's because the unions don't act on their behalf. Okay, he had a second heart attack. This is the other guy, Hughes. Lisa says the autopsy showed it was most likely the second heart attack. The first one seemed to have gone unnoticed. Wow. So he had two heart attacks on the field and nobody noticed anything? Total irresponsibility on behalf of the doctors. And people say, okay, 41 years ago, the doctor, 42 years ago, um, the doctors were even worse than they are now. Now they're better. Are they, though? Lisa says, an autopsy revealed that Hughes had an undiagnosed heart disease and that a blood clot in a clogged artery had dislodged, possibly from a hit he took during the game. Wow. Well, and you know what? People will say, people like Heartless Skip Bayless, they'll say, oh, well, that's just a part of the game. That's just uh, the consequence of playing, what do you want? That comes with the territory. It ain't ballet, all these other cliches. But these are human beings, guys. Get out of that mentality that these people are expendable. Because maybe to the league they're expendable. A million people can do what they do. But right, right. But still to their families they're not expendable. Lisa says undiagnosed, meaning the team didn't do a full medical testing. And people say, okay, well, that was 42 years ago. It's gotten better since then. But has it really? Has it? The Damar Hamlin thing wouldn't have happened if it had gotten better. It hasn't really gotten better. It hasn't got. I mean, Dr. Amalu's case with the CT put a lot of pressure on them. The incidents with concussion victims put a lot of pressure on them. But still, yes, Lisa is correct. It has gotten worse. And why has it gotten worse? Because you got to remember, guys, the Super Bowl started in 1966. That was the first Super Bowl in 1966. Um, uh, the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Green Bay Packers. And this incident that happened was 1971. So the Super Bowl was basically brand new in people's minds, hadn't even been 10 years old yet. And football wasn't the kind of big business that it would later become because of the Super Bowl. Football was still kind of a niche sport. Kind of college football was big in certain areas, particularly in the Rust Belt states and in the South, where college towns, because that's the origins of football. Football comes out of the college scene. It was a sport invented in college by Walter Camp in the middle 1900s. Adapted from soccer and from association football, aka soccer, and rugby. and it was confined to just college sports. And then over time, especially in the South, you had cotton bowls, you had different kinds of bowl games that would take place during holidays like Thanksgiving. And then in 1966, you finally had the game of all games, the championship of championships, which is the Super Bowl. But when this incident occurred that Lisa's talking about, football wasn't that big yet. Football became big because of the Super Bowl. It became big in the latter half of the 1970s and in the 1980s and 90s and 2000s. It began to be the dominant sport in the world. I mean, in the United States, as it took the place, it became the moniker now is it's America's game. It took the place of baseball for a lot of different reasons. One, because uh, life is more fast paced than when baseball was invented. Baseball was invented in the early 1900s. Um, no, at least the incident was in 1971. The first Super Bowl was in 1966. So the first Super Bowl had taken place already, but it wasn't. It was less than 10 years old. So the Super Bowl was basically brand new. You know, it was like Super Bowl, okay, 1966 to 19. It was like Super Bowl 5. In 19. Um, okay, I was a little off on the date. 60s, 67. Okay, yeah, it was like Super Bowl. It wasn't 5. It was like 4. Yeah, Lisa's doing her due diligence and her homework here. Um, I was off by a year. It was 19. It wasn't 66. It was 67. But it was still the Kansas City Chiefs uh, versus the Green Bay Packers. But the point is that was 67. The incident that we're talking about, the old incident, happened in 71. It was less than 10 years old, the Super Bowl at that time. So the NFL wasn't big business yet. You know, baseball, the World Series uh, was still the number one. It was still number one in the hearts of Americans. Still the number one sport um, in America at that time. Now, fast forward to 2023, football is the biggest sport in the United States. Even when it's not football season, you turn on Sports Center, you turn on ESPN, people are obsessed with the NFL. It's Sunday. Super Bowl Sunday is like a freaking holiday. Super Bowl Sunday is like Christmas. Super Bowl Sunday is like Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? Um, Even you go to church, that Sunday, even the pastor will rush through his sermon in order to be able to go back home to watch football. And it's like he said in the movie Concussions. He said, one of the guys says to Will Smith's character, Dr. Amalu, he says, how are you going to take on the league that has an entire day of the week dedicated to it? And that's true. Sunday during football season, especially the Super Bowl, but even the playoffs games, you can't you can't turn on the TV, regular TV, not cable, regular TV, without seeing something about the NFL on TV. It is ubiquitous. Football is ubiquitous in American culture. But Lisa says they tried to really make it a holiday because a lot of people said that the Monday after um, is tough to go back to work. People wanted the Monday after to go to the Super Bowl. Uh, you know, the Monday after the Super Bowl off. See, so maybe eventually they will. But it's funny because it's only a big deal here in the United States. That's the reason. That's one of the reasons I believe anyway that um baseball stopped being our national pastime, our number one game, and football took the place of it in our hearts was because baseball was exported to other countries, particularly the Spanish speaking world. As we were colonizing or becoming politically involved with parts of the Spanish speaking world and Japan later on after World War II, we kind of forced them or taught them to play the game of baseball, and they began to be, especially the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and like I said, Japan. They began to be better at it than us. We were the originators. We invented the game, and then they learned the game, and now the student is better than the teacher, at it. So we no longer saw ourselves in it. It was no longer a part of us anymore. So we moved on to something different that is uniquely us. You know what I mean? And that we've tried to teach it to other people, but other people are like, well, why would I care about that football when I have this football, soccer, the original football? That's my football. You know what I mean? I don't want to learn that football because I have my own, you know, soccer. And people from other countries, outside of the U.S. will say, well, that's not even football. You don't play with your feet. You run around with your feet, but you don't play with your feet. You have a kickoff, you have a kickoff, but you don't use your feet like they use in soccer. You know what I mean? So soccer is the real football. That's just handball. You know what I mean? So they don't want to make it an Olympic sport because other countries, America has tried to make it an Olympic sport. They've tried to put it as one of the sports in the Olympics, but other countries don't want it because it'd be unfair because America, um, no other country is good at it. America would just kick everybody's butt, you know what I mean? And nobody can compete with us because now in some parts of the world, like in the Pacific Islands, you know, parts of the Pacific Islands, the Polynesian islands that are more connected with the United States culturally. That are some of them are part of the United States too, politically, like Guam and American Samoa. Uh, they do know how to play football, and they're very good at it because they're big people. You know what I mean? Like Roman Reigns' family. You know what I mean? Like um, those people, the Samoans, the Islanders, they're really good. The Usos. You know what I mean? They're really good at football because they're very large people and they've learned it from the United States. But most of the world not don't know how to play it. They have their own. They have soccer, and vice versa with us. We don't pay attention to soccer all that much because we're like, well, we have our own version of football. So interesting. Remember, like I said, football, American football, developed at a time when America was very isolated. It was a time before World War II that America was very isolated from the rest of the world. You know, we didn't participate in things that the rest of the world did. We had our own thing going on. Lisa says the U.S. should ban football. I don't think a lot of I don't think a lot of businesses or companies would be happy about that, least. And I don't think a lot of women, well, maybe a lot of women would be, because their husband the husbands were paying more attention. You know what I mean? Because I've heard a lot of women, wives, complain. You know what I mean? Oh, all my husband does all day is he watches football all day Sunday. I can't get him to do nothing. I can't get him to take the trash out. You know, he stick glued to the TV. So maybe they'll be happy if it's banned. But in England, in England, it's funny, Lise. Their nickname for football for short, of course, their football, which is soccer. We talked about it earlier, right? Uh, their version of football, soccer, but what they call it for short, footy, footy. Imagine us, hey, I'm gonna go play a game of footy. Sounds like a game you play with us, critter, crushed under the table. Footy. And notice, notice, Lace, football is the only game in the world that women haven't entered into. American football is the only game that women haven't entered into. Women, women have entered into every sport under the sun, including the more dangerous ones like MMA and boxing. Yes, football is dangerous and stuff. You can get knocked around and hit in the head, concussions. But the ob- what do you mean, Lise? We just finished saying that football is the most popular sport in the United States. How's it not popular? We just finished saying that they were thinking about making Super Bowl Sunday into a holiday. I don't get what you mean, not popular. Maybe not popular with. I can't even say not popular with women because I've seen, I've seen female fans that are just as devoted as their male counterparts to certain football teams. I always found it interesting with football that it's the only sport where people are devoted more to the team. I look, I didn't even know there was a football league of women. But it's the only sport in the world that people are devoted more to the team. If you're a person that likes individualistic glory, oh wow. Okay, there. I didn't even know it existed. It just started in 2009. You know what I mean? So it doesn't really have a history all that much, compared to like the WNBA or women's baseball. Right, Lisa is hitting them hard today. Shout out to Lisa. you know, yeah, because I'm not. Look, guys, I knew about the first Super Bowl, kind of. Lisa corrected me on the year, but I knew kind of it started in the late '60s. You know what I mean? Technically, the season started in 1966 and ended in '67 because remember, the year they have the Super Bowl, the season started the previous year. So, like this year's Super Bowl will be from the 2022 season. I knew about that because I watched this documentary on it years ago. You know what I mean? On how the Super Bowl began. I knew a little bit about some history of football, but overall, you guys know I could care less about football. I could care less about any organized sport. So Lisa really is the one that has to help me out when it comes to this. You know, and part of the reason why I don't like football is the reason I was just saying before I was talking about the women's football league. When you One of the things that attracts me to sports and all things is group dynamics, but also individuals. When I learn about things, I like to learn about them through the prism of the individual. And individualistic glory is not something you will find in football. Like when Ken Burns did the baseball documentary, which is the most groundbreaking sports documentary series that I ever seen. He's Ken Burns. He's one of the best documentary filmmakers of all time, right? He profiled all the famous baseball players, Honus Wagner, Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, Jackie Robinson, Hank Aaron, all the way up to like Barry Bonds. all the way up to like Barry Bonds, people like that. And you got to really know them as individuals. With football, people are football. Yeah, it's an interesting topic related to health, Lisa. Yeah, thank you for this topic. It's not something I would ever touch on. But with football, um, you know, the individual is secondary to the team. The team dynamic is way more important in football. And I think that's one of the good things about football. That's one of the reasons I don't watch it because I like to focus on the individual, and see movements and social dynamics through the eyes of the prism of a particular individual. But I think football for a young person, if it wasn't so high contact and such danger, medically involved, as we see with Damar Hamlin, um, I would encourage it for young people because of the team dynamic. You have to put the team above yourself, and it teaches you to function as a team player. Whereas if it's an individualistic sport like boxing or wrestling or MMA, well, it's all about self. That encourages selfish characteristics, not good characteristics. Like selflessness. You know what I mean? So it's good in that sense, but the physical part they need to do better. The NFL needs to do better. It's a very physically demanding and physically taxing sport. But anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think on the Damar Hamlin thing and thoughts and prayers to his family, man. Hope he gets better and hope the NFL does better. And thank you, Lisa, with all the facts, coming with all the facts today, really helping me out with this episode. Peace, love you guys.